The Alpha King arrived as a servant to meet his future mate. What he saw shocked him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. The Alpha King came as a servant and found his future queen kneeling in the snow. Caleb Whitmore wore a plain gray coat, rough leather gloves, and the false name Cole Bennett stitched into the servant ledger. No crown, no royal seal, no black cloak trimmed in silver, just mud on his boots and frost in his breath as he stepped through the back gate of the Harper estate before sunrise. He had crossed nearly 80 miles under a hidden escort to meet the girl the moon had chosen as his future mate. Expecting silk, rehearsed, and another ambitious daughter trained to bow prettily before power. Instead he heard laughter. Thin, polished, cruel laughter drifting across the courtyard like glass over ice. Caleb stopped beneath the stone archway. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us love finds the broken. Now back to Emily. She was on her knees in the snow. A young woman in a faded blue dress too thin for the winter air. Her pale hands pressed against the frozen ground. Her dark blonde hair had slipped loose from its braid, strands clinging to her cheeks where the cold had turned her skin pink. In front of her stood Vanessa Harper, wrapped in white fur and velvet. One spotless boot lifted slightly as if the girl beneath her were nothing more than a rug. "Clean them, Omega," Vanessa said, her voice sweet enough to sound almost gentle. "With your hands." The servants around them lowered their eyes. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Caleb felt his wolf rise inside him, silent but enormous, pressing against his ribs with a warning growl. He was not allowed to reach his throat. He had come to observe, not interfere. That had been the plan. The royal council believed the future. Luna would come from the Harper bloodline, and Caleb had trusted neither prophecy nor politics enough to arrive as a king. A crown makes people lie. Fear makes them kneel. Gold makes them smile. But a servant's coat reveals what a palace gown could hide. So he watched. Emily Harper lifted her head just enough for Caleb to see her face. She was not defiant in the loud way courtiers performed courage. Her strength was quieter than that. It lived in the way she swallowed her hurt, in the way her fingers curled against the snow but did not reach for Vanessa's boot, in the way she looked past the laughter toward a shivering kitchen boy who had dropped a basket of bread nearby. Even now, humiliated and frozen, Emily seemed more worried that the boy would be blamed than that she was being broken in front of testimony. "I'll clean it," she said softly. "But please let Thomas go inside. He's been coughing all morning." Vanessa's smile faded. "Still pretending you matter?" Caleb's gloved hand tightened around the servant's satchel at his side. The leather creaked. A stable wolf nearby suddenly tucked its tail and stepped back, sensing the king beneath the disguise before any human eye could. Emily noticed the animal's reaction. Then she noticed him. For one brief second, her gray-blue eyes met Caleb's across the courtyard. She didn't know she was looking at the Alpha King. She only saw a new servant standing alone in the cold. And somehow, impossibly, she gave him a small shake warning of her head, as if telling him not to risk himself for her. That was the moment Caleb understood the prophecy had not sent him to the wrong house. It had sent him to the one person this house had tried hard to bury. 3 days earlier, Caleb Whitmore had stood in the council chamber of Blackthorn Palace while the rain struck the tall windows like thrown pearls. The room smelled of candle smoke, old parchment, and nervous men pretend not to be afraid. Around the obsidian table, 12 royal advisors waited for him to accept what they had already decided. Lord Alden Pierce, the oldest of them, placed a sealed moon prophecy before the king and bowed his silver head. "Your Majesty, the sign is clear. Your future Luna comes from the Harper bloodline. The house has been summoned. They will present their finest daughter at Winter Court." Caleb did not touch the parchment. He looked at the wax seal, pale blue beneath the firelight, and felt nothing but the familiar weight of duty pressing against his chest. For years noble families had sent daughters to his palace dressed in silk and hope. Each one taught to smile at his scars, praised his victories, and hid the hunger in her eyes until the wedding vows were spoken. They wanted a throne. They wanted a crown. None of them had ever looked at the man beneath it. Their finest daughter, Caleb repeated, his voice calm enough to make the room colder, or their most useful lie. No one answered. That silence told him more than any report could. The Harper estate sat 40 miles north of the capital, wealthy enough to matter, old enough to be respected, and ambitious enough to trouble him. Their records named 2 young women of age. Vanessa Harper, celebrated at every seasonal ball, and Emily Harper, mentioned only once in 10 years in a household inventory besides servants, grain stores, and winter linens. Caleb had read that line twice. A daughter recorded like property, an omega hidden in the margins of her own family name. By midnight, he had made his decision. He will not arrive with trumpets. He would not let the Harpers polish their cruelty before presenting it to him as loyal. He ordered his guard captain, Marcus Vale, to send a small escort by the eastern road and prepare servant papers under the name Cole Bennett. Marcus had stared at him for a full breath too long. Your Majesty, walking into a noble house without your crest is dangerous. Caleb had fastened the plain gray coat himself. So is marrying a woman I have only seen through other people's lies. The next morning, while Blackthorn Palace still slept beneath fog and pine shadow, Caleb left through the stable gate with no crown on his head and no royal ring on his hand. Only one mark remained uncovered, hidden beneath the cuff of his glove. The dark crescent burned into his wrist at birth, the sign of the Alpha King. As his horse carried him through frozen fields and sleeping towns, he wondered which Harper daughter the moon had chosen. He expected pride. He expected performance. He expected a girl trained to say the right words while her family counted the power she might bring them. What he did not expect was the ache that struck his chest the moment he reached the Harper courtyard. What he did not expect was snow, laughter, and Emily on her knees trying to protect a coughing kitchen boy while everyone else pretended her kindness was weak. In that instant, the servant disguise stopped being a test. It became a witness. Emily Harper had learned to disappear before she learned to dream. In the old portraits lining the west hallway, her father still stands above the fireplace in his black ceremonial coat, one hand resting on the shoulder of a little blonde girl who looked too small for the weight of his name. That girl had been Emily at 6 years old, before fever carried Alpha Nathaniel Harper into the ground, before the house changed its locks, its rules, and finally its memory. After his funeral, Rebecca Harper through the estate like winter claimed a garden. She didn't shout at first. She simply corrected. Emily's chair was moved farther from the dining table. Emily's lessons were cancelled because the tutors were suddenly too expensive. Emily's dresses were given to Vanessa because a future leader must look presentable. By the time Emily turned 16, the servants no longer called her Miss Harper unless Rebecca was out of earshot. By 19 they mostly didn't call her anything at all. The official story was gentle enough for visitors. Poor Emily was fragile. Poor Emily preferred quiet work. Poor Emily had an omega scent so faint that public gatherings overwhelmed her. The truth was colder. Rebecca had buried her stepdaughter in plain sight, not behind a locked door, but behind aprons, laundry baskets, kitchen smoke, and the constant suggestion that Emily should be grateful for a roof over her head. Vanessa became the shining face of the Harper bloodline, all pearl combs and practiced laughter, while Emily carried trays through side corridors and slept in a narrow attic room where frost traced silver veins along the window. Each morning. Yet, the house couldn't strip everything from her. It couldn't take the way she remembered every servant's birthday. It couldn't take the way nervous horses calmed when she whispered near their ears. It could not take the strange warmth in her hands when someone was sick, or the quiet pulling her chest whenever the moon rose full and bright above the pines. Emily never called it magic. Magic belongs to royal blood, old queens, and stories told beside fires. She called it instinct, and she kept it hidden because hidden things survived longer in the Harper estate. That morning, after Vanessa finally swept away from the courtyard, Emily rose slowly from the snow, her knees stiff, her fingers aching from the cold. Thomas, the kitchen boy, tried to apologize, but she shook her head and pressed the fallen bread basket back into his arms. "Go inside before Mrs. Bell sees you coughing," she said softly. "I will tell her I dropped it." Thomas looked toward the new servant standing near the archway, then back at Emily. He saw everything. Emily followed his gaze. Cole Bennett had not moved. There mud on his boots and a servant's satchel at his side. But he did not carry himself like a man used to be ordered around. His stillness had edges. His eyes, a clear silver gray, held too much attention, as if he saw not only what had happened, but everyone had tried to hide around it. Emily lowered her voice. Then I hope he is smart enough to forget it. She stepped past Caleb with her head bowed, but as she did, her shoulder brushed his sleeve. A quiet shock moved through both of them, softer than lightning, warmer than breath. Emily stopped for half a second, startled by the sudden calm that opened in her chest. Caleb felt it too, though he hid it better. The bond did not announce itself with thunder. It arrived like recognition, like coming home to a place neither of them had ever been allowed to name. Emily kept walking because stopping would have admitted that something inside she had shifted. The warmth from that brief touch followed her down the servants' corridor, through the smell of rising bread and wood smoke, past the copper pots hanging over the kitchen hearth. She told herself it was nothing. A strange morning. A strange servant. A strange reaction born from cold and embarrassment. But her wolf, quiet as it had always been, stirred like a sleeping thing listening for a familiar voice. Caleb followed at a careful distance, carrying the satchel of a man who belonged to nowhere important. Every instinct in him demanded answers. Why was the legal daughter of Nathaniel Harper dressed like kitchen help? Why did the servants watch her with pity but obey Rebecca with fear? Why had the moon bond answered when Emily barely touched his sleeve? He could have ended the charade there. One word, one reveal, one royal command, and every person in that house will have fallen to their knees. But the truth forced out too soon was easy to hide behind apologies. Caleb wanted to see what they did when no one powerful was watching. Near the pantry door, he let the silver tray slip from his hands. It struck the stone floor with a bright, ringing crash that froze the kitchen into silence. Mrs. Bell, the housekeeper, turned sharply from the stove. "New boy," she snapped. "Are you useless before breakfast?" Caleb lowered his head, though the posture felt foreign on his spine. "My apologies, ma'am." A few servants exchanged nervous looks. Dropping silver before guests arrived was enough to earn punishment in many noble houses, even without broken glass. Emily moved before anyone else did. She crossed the kitchen quickly, crouched beside the scattered spoons, and began gathering them into her apron. "It was my fault," she said. "I left the edge of the table wet." The tray slipped. Caleb looked down at her. "That is not true." Her eyes flicked up to him, urgent and quiet. "It is true enough to keep you out of trouble." Mrs. Bell hesitated, her lined face softening for barely a breath before fear closed over it again. "Clean it, Emily. Both of you. And do it fast." The kitchen returned to motion, but Caleb remained still, caught by the simple injustice of her lie. She didn't know him. She had no reason to protect him. Yet she had stepped between a stranger and resulted as naturally as breathing. When they were alone near the wash basin, Emily noticed a thin red mark across his palm where a rough edge of the tray had scratched him. "You are hurt," she murmured. "It is nothing. People always say that when they expect no one to care." She tore a narrow strip from the clean cloth tucked into her apron and wrapped it around his hand with careful fingers. Caleb had been touched by healers, crowned by elders, armored by soldiers, and greeted by nobles who kissed his ring with trembling lips. None of it had felt like this. Emily tied the cloth in a neat knot and gave a faint smile that did not quite reach her tired eyes. "Servants bleed too. People forget that." Caleb's throat tightened. For a moment the king had no answer. Only the man remains, standing in a cold kitchen with his hand in hers. Realizing the girl everyone treated like nothing had just shown him the first honest kindness he had received in years. By noon, the Harper estate had dressed itself for guests. But Caleb saw what the polished halls tried to hide. Garlands of white pine framed the front doors. Silver ribbons climbed the staircase. In the great hall, servants arranged crystal glasses beneath chandeliers bright enough to make every lie look beautiful. Vanessa moved through it all like a queen already crowned, correcting flowers, tilting mirrors, practicing the smile she would offer the royal envoy that evening. Emily moved behind her like a shadow carrying the weight. She cleans the glasses Vanessa would drink from. She stitched a loose pearl on Vanessa's gown. She carried hot water upstairs, folded napkins downstairs, and answered every sharp command with the same quiet, "Yes, ma'am." Caleb stayed close enough to watch and far enough to remain only Cole Bennett, the new servant with rough gloves and lowered eyes. The longer he watched, the less he understood how the house had mistaken softness for weakness. Emily's kindness did not make her fragile. It made her impossible to measure. In the east corridor, an elderly maid named Ruth pressed a hand to her side and leaned against the wall, her face pale with exhaustion. Before anyone else noticed, Emily put down a basket of linens and guided the woman onto a bench. "Breathe with me," she whispered. "Slowly. That is it." She placed her palm over Ruth's wrist. Nothing dramatic happened. No flash of light. No storm of magic. But the air changed. The old woman's breathing eased. The tightness in her face softened. Caleb felt the pulse of it from 15 feet away. A quiet warmth passing through the corridor like sunlight under a closed door. Ruth blinked in surprise. "Child, how did you do that?" Emily pulled her hand back as if she had touched fire. "You were only tired." Caleb knew better. His people had spent years searching for healers with that kind of gift. And here one stood hidden beneath an apron apologizing for the miracle of being gentle. Later, near the back steps, he saw her give half of her lunch to Thomas, who tried to refuse until she smiled and tucked the bread into his pocket. Near the stables, she knelt beside a young wolfhound frightened by the noise of arriving carriages. The animal had been trembling beneath a feed cart, but one low murmur from Emily brought its head into her lap. "There you are," she whispered, stroking its pale fur. "No one is angry with you." Caleb watched the wolfhound settle, watched its fear melt beneath her hand, and felt something in his own chest answer. Not command it, not desire for power recognition. Then voices drifted from the open library window above them. "Rebecca Harper speaks first, low and tense. The envoy arrives tonight. Keep Emily out of sight until Vanessa wears the moonstone." Vanessa's laugh was light, almost bored. "Mother, the king will never know." The prophecy named the Harper bloodline, not the forgotten Omega. Caleb went still. Inside him, the wolf stopped pacing and listening. Rebecca's voice sharpened. "That stone was Emily's inheritance. Once you wear it before the court, the bond will read you first. Smile, bow, and let everyone believe the moon chose you." The words landed softly, but Caleb felt the world narrow around them. The shock was not that they had lied. Courts lied every day. The shock was how carefully they had built a life around stealing one girl's name, one girl's place, one girl's future. Emily stood beneath the window with the wolfhound's head resting against her knees, unaware that her whole destiny had just been spoken above her like a secret meant to bury her. Caleb looked at the thin cloth wrapped around his hand, the knot she had tied with such care, and his decision settled inside him with the calm of falling snow. He will let the evening come in. He would let them present their lie beneath every candle in the great hall. And then when the whole house was watching, he would answer it like a king. By sunset, the Harper estate glowed as if it had never known a secret. Every window burns gold against the winter darkness. Carriages rolled up the long drive, their wheels crunching over packed snow, carrying nobles from neighboring packs who had come to witness the royal envoy's judgment. Inside the great hall, heat rose from the fireplaces and mixed with the scent of pine, candle wax, and expensive perfume. Musicians played softly beneath the balcony. Silver banners hung from the rafters. Every polished surface reflects Vanessa Harper in her white gown, standing at the center of the room with the moonstone resting against her throat like a captured star. Emily stood near the sideboard with a tray of wine glasses balanced in both hands, dressed in the plain gray uniform Rebecca had chosen for her. It was too simple for the occasion, too thin for the draft that slipped under the doors, but Emily did not complain. She kept her eyes lowered and moved when told, invisible by habit even while the stone at Vanessa's throat seemed to tug at something deep inside her chest. Caleb noticed the way Emily's breath caught whenever the moonstone flashed. He noticed the way the gem dimmed against Vanessa's skin, then brightened when Emily passed within a few feet of it. No one else cared enough to look. They were too busy admiring the lie. Rebecca stood beside her daughter, smiling with perfect control, welcoming each guest as if she had not spent years erasing the true heir of the house. "Tonight," Rebecca announced when the room had filled, "our family is honored to present Vanessa Harper, the brightest daughter of our line, to the crown's consideration." Applause stirred through the hall. Vanessa lowered her Lashes with practiced modesty. Emily tightened her fingers around the tray until the glass rims trembled. Caleb stood among the servants along the wall, his greatcoat blending into shadow, his face calm, his wolf silent with dangerous patience. Across the room, Captain Marcus Vale had arrived as the official royal envoy, dressed in black and silver, carrying enough authority to make every noble straightener. Only Caleb knew Marcus was playing his part. Only Marcus knew the king stood 12 steps away in servant's clothing, watching the harpers condemn themselves with every polished word. The Alpha King values loyalty, Marcus said, his voice carrying over the music as it faded. He values truth even more. Rebecca's smile flickered, but only for a second. Then he will find no house more devoted than ours. Vanessa lifted her chin. My family has waited years to serve the crown. I have prepared my whole life for whatever destiny requires of me. Emily looked down at the tray, and Caleb saw the smallest movement in her face. Not jealousy, not anger, but the quiet pain of hearing someone else wear the life that had been taken from her. A young noblewoman near the fireplace whispers, "Is that servant not another Harper girl?" The question slipped through the room like a threat pulled loose. Rebecca's gaze snaps toward Emily. Vanessa's hand closed around the moonstone. For the first time all evening, fear crossed her perfect face. Emily felt every eye turn toward her. The tray suddenly seemed too heavy. She stepped back, but Rebecca's voice cut across the hall smooth and cold. Emily is a distant dependent, kind-hearted but confused easily. We keep her close out of charity. A few guests murmured with polite pity. Emily's cheeks warmed, yet she said nothing. She had survived too many rooms like this by staying quiet. Caleb, however, was no longer looking at the crowd. He was looking at the moonstone, now glowing beneath his clenched fingers, not toward the woman who wore it, but toward the forgotten girl holding a servant's tray at the edge of the light. For one suspended moment, the great hall did not move. The question about Emily hung above the music, above the candles, above every polished smile Rebecca had arranged so carefully. Emily could feel the room studying her now, not as a person, but as a problem no one had expected to see. Vanessa recovered first. She laughed softly, a bright, delicate sound that tried to cover the crack in the air. "Please forgive the confusion," she said, stepping toward Emily with the moonstone clenched at her throat. "Emily helps in the house. Sometimes she forgets where service ends and family begins." A few nobles smiled because it was easier than looking uncomfortable. Emily kept her gaze on the tray in her hands. The wine inside the glasses trembled in tiny red circles. She told herself to breathe, to be small, to survive this room the way she had survived every room before it. But the moonstone kept glowing brighter now, casting pale light across Vanessa's fingers as if it were trying to escape her. Captain Marcus Vale noticed. So did Caleb. Rebecca noticed them noticing, and fear sharpened her face into something hard. "Emily," she said too sweetly, "you look unwell. Set the tray down and return to the kitchen." Emily obeyed, or tried to. She took one step toward the side door, but Vanessa moved into her path. "Not that way," Vanessa whispered through her smile. "You have already drawn enough attention." Emily's shoulder brushed the tray table. One glass tipped, spilling wine across the pale front of Vanessa's gown. The stain spread like a red flower blooming in silk. The room gasped. Emily froze, her hands flying to the edge of the table. "I am sorry," she said at once. "I didn't mean to." Vanessa stared at the stain, then at Emily, and in that second the mask fell. "You did this on purpose." "No." Emily's voice was barely above a breath. "I would never." "Because you are jealous," Vanessa said louder, turning so every guest could hear. "Because no matter how much charity this family gives you, you cannot stand to see someone worthy chosen over you." Murmurs spread through the hall. Rebecca pressed a hand to her heart as if wounded by the shame of it. "Emily, say sorry to my daughter." Emily looked at the floor. The old instinct rose inside her, familiar and heavy. "Apologize and the storm passes faster. Apologize and no one looks too closely. Apologize and tomorrow you are still alive beneath this roof." But then she saw Cole standing among the servants, his silver-gray eyes fixed on her with a stillness that felt like shelter. Not pity, not commanded, only a quiet question. "Who were you when they stopped telling you to be nothing?" Emily lifted her chin by a single inch. It was a small movement, but Caleb felt it through the bond like sunrise touching ice. "I am sorry the wine spilled," she said softly. "But I did nothing wrong." Silence struck harder than any shout. Vanessa's face changed. Rebecca's smile disappears completely. "Kneel." Rebecca ordered that Emily's breath caught. Around them no one spoke. No one defends her. The noble guests looked away as if dignity were something that could be misplaced and politely ignored. A house guard stepped forward, uncertain but obedient, and reached for Emily's arm. Caleb moved before the man touched her. He left the servant line with calm, measured steps, the gray coat brushing against his boots. The cloth Emily had tied still wrapped around his hand. Every wolf in the room felt something shift. Candles flickered. Conversation died. Rebecca turned on him with cold outrage. "Servant, return to your place." Caleb stopped between Emily and the guard. His voice was low, controlled, and final. "No. She has been in the wrong place long enough." Rebecca stared at Caleb as if the floor itself had spoken back to her. For a moment her shock was so complete that she forgot to breathe. Then pride rushed in to cover it. "You forget yourself," she said, each word polished thin. "This is a noble house, and you are a hired servant." Caleb didn't move. Emily stood behind him, still trembling from the effort of despair to kneel. Her fingers curled against the side of her skirt. She could see only the back of his gray coat, the rough seam across his shoulders, the cloth she had tied around his hands. He looked like a servant. He should have seemed powerless. Yet every person in the hall had gone unnaturally still, as if some older instincts had warned them not to mistake plain clothing for weakness. "Captain." Marcus Vale stepped forward from the center of the room. "Lady Harper," he said, his voice quiet. "Choose your next words carefully." Rebecca turned on him, desperate now. "Captain, surely you will not allow a household servant to insult my daughter before the crown." Marcus looked past her to Caleb and lowered his head. "Not deeply. Not yet. Just enough." The first crack opened in the room. Vanessa saw it. Her hand tightened around the moonstone until the pale gem flashed painfully bright. "Mother," she whispered. Caleb lifted his injured hand and began unwrapping the strip of cloth Emily had tied there. He did it slowly, not to be dramatic, but because he wanted every eye to follow the truth as it appeared. The cloth fell into his palm. Beneath it, on the inside of his wrist, the dark crescent mark glowed like moonlight caught beneath skin. A gasp moved through the hall. One noble dropped his glass onto the carpet. Another stepped back so quickly his chair scraped the floor. The musicians lowered their instruments one by one until silence swallowed the last note. Marcus went down on one knee. Then every royal guard along the wall did the same. "Your Majesty," Marcus said. The words changed the air. Emily felt them pass through her before she understood them. "Your Majesty." Her gaze moved from the kneeling guards to the man standing in front of her. The man she had warned in the courtyard. The man whose hand she had bandaged in the kitchen. The man who had looked at her as if her dignity mattered before anyone else remembered she had one. Caleb removed the gray servant coat and handed it to Marcus. He wore no crown beneath it, no jeweled armor, no shining cloak, but he did not need any of those things. Power settled around him with the calm weight of a winter mountain. Rebecca's face lost every trace of color. Vanessa took one step back, but the moonstone at her throat pulled forward, straining toward Emily like a compass finding north. Caleb looked at it, then at Vanessa. "That does not belong to you." Vanessa's lips parted, but no answer came. Rebecca tried to speak for her. "There has been a misunderstanding." Caleb's eyes turned to her, silver and steady. "No, there has been a theft dressed as tradition. A daughter hidden as a servant. An inheritance worn by the wrong throat. A prophecy twisted for ambition." The room seemed to shrink around the Harpers. Emily could barely breathe. She wanted to deny it, to ask him not to say more, not because it was false, but because the truth felt too bright after years in the dark. "Emily Harper," he said, and her name sounded like something preserved. "I saw her long before this room did." The moonstone tore free from Vanessa's necklace without a hand touching it. It rose into the candlelight, trembling like a star that had finally remembered where it belonged, then drifted across the silent hall and settled against Emily's chest. The moment it touched her, the gray servant uniform seemed to catch a soft silver glow, not bright enough to blind anyone, but pure enough to make every lie in the room feel small. Emily lifted both hands to the stone, stunned by its warmth. For years, she had believed her life was something to endure quietly, something left over after everyone else had taken what they wanted. Now the entire hall watched as the moon itself answered her. Caleb stepped toward her slowly, giving her space to breathe, to choose to stand without being pulled. Then he lowered himself to one knee before her, not as a king demanding loyalty, but as a man honoring the woman no one else had protected. Gasps moved through the nobles. Rebecca looked as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. Vanessa's perfect smile broke into disbelief. Emily couldn't look away from Caleb. "Please stand," she whispered, because kindness was still her first language, even after everything. Caleb's expression softened. "Not until they understand," he said. Then he turned enough for the whole hall to hear him. "Emily Harper is the rightful daughter of this house, the keeper of the moonstone, and the woman chosen by fate to stand beside the throne. From this night forward, no one will call her Charity. No one will call her servant. No one will bury her name again." Marcus rose only after Caleb did, and at his command, the royal guard stepped forward not with anger, but with calm authority. Rebecca and Vanessa were removed from the center of the room, their titles suspended until the royal court could judge the theft, the deception, and the years of hidden cruelty. There was no shouting, no speaketh, and only result quiet and final settling over the Harper estate like snow over old tracks. Caleb removed the black cloak from Marcus' arm and placed it around Emily's shoulders. It was heavier than she expected, warm from the firelight, edged in silver thread that glimmered against the moonstone. She looked down at herself, then at the room full of people who had spent years not seeing her. For the first time she did not lower her eyes. Outside, beyond the tall windows, the clouds parted and moonlight spilled over the frozen grounds where she had knelt that morning. Only now she stood beside the Alpha King, not rescued because she was weak, but recognized because she had remained gentle in a house that tried to make her bitter. And maybe that is the heart of this story. True strength does not always roar, command, or wear a crown. Sometimes it kneels in the snow and still worries about a coughing child. Sometimes it gives bread away when it has almost nothing. Sometimes it tells the truth softly, even when the whole room expects silence and my opinion. Emily was never broken. She was simply surrounded by people who benefited from calling her small. What do you think matters more in a future queen? Power that demands fear? Or kindness that protects others when no one is watching? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story reminds you that destiny can still find the forgotten, subscribe for more tales where love, courage, and justice finally meet under the moon. All stories are fictional and for entertainment only, sharing themes of courage, kindness, self-worth, healing, love, respect, and second chances. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.